Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 23 in our series. As I stated at the end of the last lesson, I just decided to work a little bit more into this area here, which is starting to take some shape now. What we're going to do today in today's lesson is I'm just going to start bringing some of this contrasted value out in this. I'm guessing it's the clothing that this young lady's wearing, because it's then going to give me a good reference point as to how dark I need to go in this lighter area here, and possibly start doing a little bit of work in this scarf area. And for this today, I'm going to be using my 2B, 4B and a little bit of the 7B just to bring some of the darkness out. I'm also going to be using my kneaded eraser. So just before you get started, let's just freshen up our kneaded eraser. If you just bring this and pull it apart a little bit just to freshen it up, and then I'm going to roll this into a ball. It's been really good seeing some of your progress on the Facebook group. If this is the first time you've visited one of my videos or my channel, then don't forget, come and join us over on the Facebook group. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginners to Pro, and I post the videos on there a couple of times a week. I've been posting them, and I've also been really enjoying seeing some of you posting your work on there, and some of your original work, but also some of the work from the lessons. So without further ado, I'm going to take my 2B pencil and I'm just going to start bringing in some of these darker values. Now what I'm doing here, for those of you that haven't visited the channel before, or those of you that are slightly forgetful, maybe you've not looked at all of the videos, I'm doing something called a tapered stroke here. I don't like to use blending stumps or any blending tools in any of my artwork. It's the traditional way that I learned to draw, and I feel that's the sort of the lesson that I want to get across, and I want to share with you all the techniques that I've sort of picked up over the last few years, and really get you to understand the principles of how we can achieve something that looks realistic without the aid of blending stumps, Q-tips. I've even seen people using different types of papers and artist chamois and things like that. I've got all of them. I've tried all of them myself, but I like this traditional method, this very basic method. If all you've got is some paper and pencils, can you still produce something that looks realistic? And I think that if you can do that, you can then take a different route. Like I say, I've tried various different methods, and I'm not afraid to go and use a blending stump or a Q-tip, tissue paper or something like that. But I just feel that I can always go back to what I would say my roots, and I think it's a really wonderful start point. So if this is one of the first times you've looked at any of my videos, go and check out the first few lessons. If you go to the YouTube channel and click on the YouTube channel, you'll see some subheadings at the top. One of them says videos, one of them says playlists. If you go into the playlist section, you can also find that in the announcement section on the Facebook group. If you have a look at that, you will find something called playlists, and it's Tutorial Tuesdays. Have a look in there. There's 22 lessons up to now in there, right from the very start. So right from the very beginning, I go through some various techniques and some simple lessons, some simple series that I really think is invaluable. And again, it's like I say, it's the way that I learned how to draw. So check those out, and then as you get a little bit more adventurous, maybe you're going to start having a go at some of the portraits. We did a baby portrait first. And then our last one was a realistic eye, which I had a lot of fun with. I really enjoyed drawing the eye. So have a go at those. There's no rush. The videos will be there forever. You don't need to necessarily keep up with us. But it is nice to see some of you drawing sort of along with me. But it's also nice seeing over on the Facebook group some of you posting some of the earlier work that we did a couple of months back. As always, big thank you guys for supporting both the Facebook group and my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed already, go and hit the subscribe button, and there's a little bell notification icon next to the subscribe icon, and that just notifies you of when I do release a new video. I've got lots of other types of videos over on the channel as well. I've done some art reviews, art product reviews, pencils and things like that. So it'd be brilliant to get some of your feedback in the comments section down below. So I'm filling this in with the 2B pencil, and I'm not pressing on too hard. That's one of the skills that I was having a look through the Facebook page earlier this evening and commenting on some of the work that I saw on there, where I could really tell that some of you are now starting to get to grips with this very light stroke, this very light touch. And I do go on about this an awful lot, but maintaining the tooth of the paper and not damaging the tooth of the paper is something that's very important to me. It's something that I learnt straight away when I started doing online classes from a couple of really good teachers, that the tooth of the paper is something that we really do want to try and preserve. Now, what that means is if I'm pressing on too hard and I'm scoring the paper, I'm going to embed the graphite down into the tooth of the paper, and I'm not going to be able to remove that. Now, as I'm laying this graphite down now with the 2B pencil, you'll notice as I start trying to take some of these blonde hairs out in these areas that I can actually do that with relative ease, rather than having to again start gouging at the paper with either my kneaded eraser or my Mono Zero eraser, which is what I'll be using shortly. And it just allows me to reverse and hit the rewind button almost and start things over. I hate starting drawings from scratch again, giving up on a drawing. I can't remember the last time I had to start over again. And one of the reasons is we take our time, everything's on purpose. So we've been drawing this portrait now for a good amount of hours. We've probably got another 3 or 4 hours still to go before we finish this off. So it's the patience, but it's also doing things on purpose and making sure that every line is in the right place and it's there for a reason. And if we do find that we've made a mistake, we've not gone too far into it to not be able to start an area again or take a section out. So I'm just gently applying this layer of graphite with my 2B pencil. I'm using something called a Caran D'ache grafwood pencil. They're relatively expensive for pencils, but this method that I'm using of using a tapered stroke and not bearing down too hard on the paper really does save the pencil lead. I keep constantly turning the pencil as well, so every few strokes I will be turning the pencil just to self-sharpen and maintain a nice sharp point. We really don't want a blunt pencil tip for any of our drawings. We want these very fine lines, particularly if we're going for details, but I want these lines to be laying down consistently, because that's what I'm really doing, is I'm building up a series of lines. The more often you do this, the more accurate your lines will look. And I do know that looking back at these videos, when we watch them in real time, it almost looks like I'm scribbling, but I'm not going backwards and forwards with the stroke. I'm only pulling towards myself, and I'm laying these lines down very close and very evenly so that we get this lovely coverage. And it's almost like a powdered coverage. It's almost, I've always thought that when I've started to get these drawings right and happy with them, it almost has a look that we've used almost a graphite powder, and that's because we've not damaged the tooth of the paper, and therefore we're not creating an awful lot of what we call graphite shine. If you push on too hard onto the paper and we embed the graphite down into the tooth of the paper, or if we're using something like a tortillon or a blending stump, which are the same thing. They're just rolled up pieces of paper, tightly rolled pieces of paper. But if we're using something like that and we bear down into the tooth of the paper, what happens is the particles of graphite sit very, very flat and they become a reflective surface. And what that does is it gives you graphite shine. Now, it is absolutely, it's not something that we're going to be able to 100% avoid. But by laying the pencil lead down in the way that we've been looking at, this tapered stroke, we do avoid it in these initial layers. And sometimes this is dark enough for me, so I might want to only go to this sort of value. And I can leave that there with no problem, because I've not then got this, like we say, this graphite-y shine, which is going to give us a very unrealistic look at some angles. We'll definitely be able to see a little bit in the darkness of the eyes sometimes, because we have layered so much graphite in that area, going through the HB, 2H, 2B, 4B. There might even be some 7B in there. So that's going to be completely unavoidable in that area. But in these areas where we've got these layers starting to build up of 2B pencil, we're going to be able to reduce the graphite shine and keep it down to a minimum. So now I've got an initial layer of that 2B in that area here, which we're working. I guess this is sort of the shoulder area. I'm just going to use my soft brush to just brush some of the graphite around, and I'm actually going to get some of the value up into this hair, because I'm then going to be able to take out some of that value with the Mono Zero razor. So I'm going to come in with my 4B pencil now. There we go. And I'm just going to layer over again. Now, in this area, I know that this edge, which is almost leading into the hair itself, this is going to be darker. So I want a gradation of value. I want to bring this value out, but I want to try and maintain this as being slightly darker. And I'm turning my paper. I mentioned, I think it was in the last video, lesson 22, that one of the most important techniques that you can really get to grips with is moving your paper a lot, turning your paper. Now, I know I'm not turning my paper too much, and that really is just to give you a slightly better viewing experience. I'm trying to keep the paper orientated in this portrait orientation, just so that you've got a better viewing experience. But don't be afraid to move this paper as much as you can, really, because what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to change the direction of our tapered stroke. And by changing the direction of the tapered stroke, what we're going to do is we're going to start filling in the gaps, so we're not left with a grainy look to our picture. We're going to have a lovely, rich value in the darker areas, because there's nothing worse than looking at a fantastic drawing that's been laid out beautifully. It's got fantastic proportions, but then we can see this grainy look. In my opinion anyway, I know that that's possibly an art style that some people go for, but I've always been captivated by realism. It was something that I saw 3 or 4 years ago, maybe on Instagram or something like that. I saw artists that were producing realistic work, not the hyper-realistic work. That was something that I started to look at a little bit further down my art journey. It was just the realistic portraits, the kind of things that we're doing here, that I really sort of fell in love with and wanted to try and produce myself. And I noticed on a few of my earlier drawings where I'd not really quite grasped the technique, certainly not the technique that I'm trying to share with you guys now. And I had lots of drawings where we had this sort of grainy look to it, and you could see the tooth of the paper, and that was just simply because I'd not layered enough of maybe some of the harder pencils, so your H pencils or your HB pencil, just to get some of the particles of graphite down into the lower recesses of the paper. And you could just see some of that shining through, or I wouldn't say shining through, but you just got a less of a coverage, and the graphite sits on the top of the tooth of the paper and you can see down into the tooth of the paper. So I'm going to come again into the 2B pencil. And the beauty with this technique is because I'm not going to the maximum pressure with my pencils at any stage, so I'm not pressing as hard as I can always get an extra bit of value even with a grade down of pencil. So in this area here I have got 4B and I'm still able to produce more value in the area with a 2B pencil. So I've got 4B in this area, but just going over it again with the 2B still brings the value up and allows me to get this tapered transition from dark into lighter here. And that's one thing that I've mentioned before about this has obviously just been, the reference has been printed off with a regular office printer. It's just a wireless printer that I have. Now I can make this area here look more defined than what the printer's been able to make this look. So in some aspects we can actually make drawings look better than their printed counterparts. It will take a very, very good camera, very high resolution camera, maybe with a very good lens, to start to pick out some of those differences in values in that area. So actually if we look at this area here on the reference image, it's just black. It's a flat black area, and when we're drawing we want to try and avoid flat textures or flat values. So I don't want to leave anything completely white. I don't want anything to be completely the same value. I want differences in there. I want different shades going from dark to light and undulations, and that really then tricks the viewer into believing that what they're looking at is realistic. Okay, so I'm going to give that one more brush, and then we're going to start to take out some of the finer hairs with our Mono Zero eraser, which is this tool here. You can see that. It's like a mechanical pencil really, but instead of it being a lead in the end, what we have is a quite a durable, for the size of it, eraser. So I'm just going to start taking out some of these hairs here. There's a lot of them. And as you can see, because I haven't pressed on too hard, it gives me the ability to take out some of these hairs, and it's these opportunities that built up over the entire drawing. One individual hair here and there isn't going to give my drawing a realistic look, but when we find these opportunities over the entire drawing, when we look at it towards the end, it's this attention to detail that really sets our work off from the rest. Now I would be tempted to move some of that value that I've taken off with my hand. If this was a commission that I was working on, the last thing that I want to do is get oil or sweat or something like that onto my paper. So try and get into a really good habit. I know that we're not going to be giving these necessarily to anybody, these pieces that we're working on, but get yourself into the right habit. Rather than moving this excess value off with your hand, start getting into the habit of moving it with the brush, because that way we're not then going to start ruining our work at a later date and regretting it. So we've got some fantastic opportunities in this area here to take some of these lovely blonde hairs out, and I'm using the tapered stroke exactly the same as what I was doing with the pencil, and I'm constantly turning the eraser again because I want as sharp pointed edge as possible to give me the finest lines. I saw some of the work that some of you had done with the realistic eye, and in the top right hand corner of the realistic eye there were some blonde hairs, and it was quite obvious that some of you had used a regular eraser, which is obviously quite thick. My advice would be to try and trim one of the corners down, maybe with a knife or some scissors. But you'd got the right idea, but what had happened was some of the hairs looked too thick, and I call that spaghetti hair, and it makes it just look slightly unrealistic. I'm going to give this a go. This is my Derwent. It's an electric eraser. There's a button here. I don't know if you can hear that. And I'm just going to show you how you can take out some finer lines. So again, this is just going to give me an opportunity to get some more depth. Some of the lines are whiter. So where are the whitest areas? Where are my sort of mid-toned light hairs? And what I'm now going to do, taking my 2B pencil, I'm just going to start defining some of these hairs. So working in the negative spaces now, and just starting to bring out some of those. And you can also use this method to separate hairs. So maybe turn one hair that's slightly thicker into two. I can also create a sense of overlapping. It's the key when we're looking at drawing light hair. The trick is work in the negative space. We want the pencil to do the work in the negative space, and what we mean by that is the shadowed areas, the areas that hairs are crossing over one another, or the shadows underneath. Because even in your lightest of hair, there are going to be dark patches, and it's those areas that we've got to focus on in order for us to then get enough graphite in the rest of the areas in order for us to take the blonde hairs out with the eraser. And it's this process that we go through. So when we've got a little bit more graphite in to some of these areas, I'm going to take it out again. I'll brush to start with. So it's add the value, take out the value, add the value, brush, take it out again. And it's that layering process that gives our hair body and volume, rather than, like we were talking about, spaghetti hair. So I can now come in and add a whole new layer onto what I already had, defining some of these strands, and it's very important when you're drawing hair that you aren't too regimental with it. If you look at a head of hair, they're not all going in the same direction. We get a general flow, so we can see this general flow of hair is coming down and curving out and around. But within that, we've got lots of hairs that are crisscrossing and going in different directions. And again, it's training your eye to see what's actually there than what we believe is there or what we think is there. So I can now see that I need to really start to bring up the value in this area. So I'm going to use my 4B in this zone. And again, the darkest area is going to be the parts that are furthest away from the light. So in here and also in here. So I'm just going to taper that value away. Looking for these opportunities to add darker zones even within the darkest zone. So one really good habit to get into is training your eye to see where the darkest area, even within the dark zone, is, and trying to identify that, and also then trying to create that. The same trick goes with in your lightest areas. Whereabouts in the lightest zone is the lightest area? So within this strand of hair here that's coming down, there's going to be one section of that is going to be the lightest, because the way that light works is it always bounces off the area that's closest to the light source first, therefore giving us a lighter highlight. That's why we always have a light spot on our eyeball. That's the pinnacle of the curve of the eye. That's the point that's hitting the light first. So I need a little bit more value in this zone now. And that's the beauty of building the drawing up the way that we are. We don't go to one area and try and go to completion. I'm starting to build up, and adding the value in this area has now given me a better understanding of how much value I need to build up in these areas. Because when I look at my reference, this is very dark, but there are parts of this area that are almost as dark as that. So I don't want this block of value here to be the darkest block by far. I want some of these areas to be as dark, but not completely. Not the whole thing. So I can see I definitely need more value in some of these areas. And we just build the picture up in this very organic fashion. It's a bit at a time, but it's the whole picture rather than... And I've seen plenty of videos, and they're fantastic. They're absolutely amazing over on YouTube, that somebody starts in the top left corner and completes one whole section and then moves down to the next one to completion. They never go back to that area. And it looks wonderful. But for me, and certainly for the purpose of trying to teach you guys, and like I've said, once you've learnt this method, you go and do whatever you like with it, but you've always got this foundation. We've always built from the ground up, and when things go wrong, which they often do, we can go through these steps. Okay, where do I start? How do I start again? Let's find the darkest areas. Let's build the value up in those. Once I've found the darkest areas, then what do? We move up a grade of pencil. And that way you can ensure that even at times when we're feeling a little bit lost, we can always come back to this very simple method. It's quite long-winded at times, I get that, but it's simple. It's not quite painting by numbers, but it's not a million miles off. So I can now start to see again, because I'm building the value up in the areas around this lighter patch, that I do need some darker values, even within these lighter strands of hair. And then once I've got some value, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to brush the hair. We always brush our hair. And I'm going to start taking some more value out with the Mono Zero eraser. And this is the process that we're going to go through. This is how you draw blonde hair. It's actually how you draw all hair, but we put a little bit more emphasis on the brushing and the removal of hairs with the blonde hair. If we've got a darker head of hair, we're able to do a little bit less of the eraser work and do a little bit more with the values with the pencils. But even with a dark head of hair, we've still got areas that are lighter and areas that are the darkest. So the principles are still the same. And in actual fact, it's regardless of what you're drawing, whether it's hair, a skin texture, we're training our eye to see the lightest areas and the darkest areas. The darkest areas within the darker areas, the darkest areas within the light areas, the lightest areas within the lightest areas, and so on and so forth. And once you've grasped that, you no longer look at things in terms of structure and objects. So for me, this isn't hair that we're drawing, this is just different values. Light values, medium values, and dark values. And the method that I use to achieve them is with my eraser, my pencil and my brush. And that's it. And that's the beauty of learning this method. Let's get a little bit more 2B in this area here. So I'm pretty happy with sort of what we've achieved in today's lesson. What I want you to do between now and the next lesson is keep working in this dark zone, so in this contrasted area around this shoulder area. So I'm going to work all the way around here. I'm going to possibly bring this down a little bit further down in terms of how far down I'm coming here. And I just want you to keep working in this zone and similar in this zone here. So bringing the values of the dark areas up, taking the eraser and working the lighter areas. And I'll probably give this possibly another hour I would spend on this before I would contemplate moving on to recording the next lesson. You guys give it as long as you want. So in time for the next lesson, I'm going to have tried to completed this section as much as I can. Really started to define some of these. Now what I will also do is I'll probably use some HB pencil to define some of these hairs. It's not quite as dark as the 2B, but the beauty with the HB pencil is it keeps its point a little bit better, and that will allow me to keep the hairs very defined, which is what I'm trying to do there a little bit. So yeah, have a go at that. Thanks so much for watching. I'm really enjoying making these videos and had some lovely comments and some lovely feedback from you guys. So keep persevering. There's no magic pencil, there's no magic eraser, there's no magic paper. The magic comes from the amount of time and effort that you're going to put into this. Practice and practice and practice and practice. I'm still learning. I'm always going to be learning. That's the beauty with life. You never ever get to the point where we've mastered anything. There's always something we can tweak and make better. So I'm happy that I'm going to leave you with that then. I will see you no doubt over on the Facebook group. If you haven't found us already, it's Tutorial Tuesdays, Beginner to Pro. Find that in the Facebook app on your phones or tablets. I guess on a PC, a laptop. Some of you will be using that. We're going to continue to build the volume up in this area. This is looking nice now. I'm happy with this. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a good week. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.